Well, good evening. We're at day 3, I guess, lesson 3 already this week. For me, it's gone quickly. Hopefully, it's been beneficial to you all. It has certainly for me. Just quickly to go over, we've talked about Noah and the integrity of Noah, just the amazing example he was, and we certainly need to make sure that we're thinking about him, learning about him. We talked about the trust of Abraham last night and how he totally trusted God. He was willing to go anywhere God wanted him to go, do what God wanted him to do. And quite frankly, even when he didn't know where he was going, he trusted in God and he was willing to follow him. Tonight, we're going to talk about Moses and this thing called hope. What is hope that we're going to be talking about? I've talked about this often. Obviously, this is a subject that I love to talk about. Hope is not a wish. It is not something that you just hope. I hope God answers this for me. I hope that this is what happens. And it's almost just like this wish. There's a chance maybe it's going to happen. What we're talking about when it comes to hope in God, we're talking about confident expectation. When he has promised something, that's exactly what's going to happen. When he has not promised something, that does not mean things are going to happen. So he has not promised us a life with no trials. Matter of fact, he's promised us a life with trials. We're going to have trials. We're going to have temptations. But he's promised to always be with us. And that's what's going to be interesting when we talk about Moses tonight. Because Moses, we see this lesson with Moses. And so hopefully that'll be easy to see as we go through this. Moses was looking towards something greater. And so we're going to you can turn to Hebrews the 11th chapter. We're going to start there in just a moment. But it's the same for us. We focus or need to focus on the hope that comes with being a child of God. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing for God's children to see the wonderful blessings that we have in this life and the ones to come. And the amazing opportunity that it is to be able to say we can be with him for eternity. He's allowing us to be with him for eternity as his children. It's such a beautiful, beautiful picture and a beautiful thing we all can have confidence in. Now, interesting thing about Moses' story in Hebrews the 11th chapter. Verse 23 starts off by saying, by faith Moses, but who does it talk about? His parents. So it's interesting. By faith Moses, when he was born, so he's not going to have much to do with this, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Now, it's not because he was beautiful compared to being ugly. If he was ugly, they weren't going to hide him. That's not the point of what it's saying. There was something about him. There was something that's about him that his parents are going to see, Jochebed is going to see. And so they wanted to keep him. There was something that they knew they needed to do and were going to do. Whether God was involved, we're not told much about the story, but we certainly know, at least from this part, that they were not afraid of the king's edict. They were not afraid of it. They were going to keep him alive for these 3 months. And then the amazing part that we see of the story with his sister going and following Miriam, and just see God's hand throughout the story of Moses. But it starts well before Moses even knows who he is. And that's the beautiful picture that we see of this story. But it starts with his parents, which again, there's tremendous example for us as parents that we certainly can take away from that as well. But it continues on. By faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. It's a beautiful description of Moses here, and we're going to look at a little bit of some of it. What I do think is important to point out quickly is that this was a choice that Moses had, and it's a choice that he does make, and he's going to choose to endure, your version may say suffer, this ill treatment. He's choosing that over these other things. And what's so important, I'll ask you, what's so important about what is being said here in your mind?
So, as a member of the household of Pharaoh,
So if you compare the temporary pleasures of what Israel had at that time, compared to Egypt, there was no comparison, for sure. And that's quite frankly a lot of times what we compare. You compare physical things to physical things. But what is he doing? What does it say that Moses does? Who does he compare to physical things? What does he compare?
Passing pleasure of sin is not worth the glory that he can have with God.
Yeah. So he's comparing God's purpose, God, and what comes with being a child or a follower of God, this reward he talks about, to the things that were offered to him in Egypt. And there was a lot. To Sean's point, if you didn't hear him, from their perspective, I mean, Egypt was the power at the time. That's where the money was. And certainly it's going to grow as time goes on. But it's fascinating to see the choice that he's going to make. Now, there's some interesting points that are being made, and if we were studying Hebrews, we would dive into it on this chapter when they talk about Moses. But this is what he is choosing. He's choosing God's purpose over or being more valuable than whatever Egypt has to offer. And you certainly see that time and time again. God's people are more valuable than the people of Egypt. He was going to be spending time with them. That's who he was going to be with. That's who he's going to deliver as we go forward. And obviously, God's peace is far more valuable than whatever Egypt was going to offer. And certainly, you see this time and time again as we go through this. But I cannot make this point or emphasize it enough. This is his choice that he is making. Okay? This is not something that he had to do. It's a choice that he is making to do this. And so that's what's so powerful to me of any of these men that we've talked about thus far, that you see the choices that they are making. It's the same opportunity that we all have in these choices, and they're hard. I think it's, when you stop and think about what Moses is choosing that's up there, we certainly can make application of that in 2024 America when it comes to the choices of riches. That is an easy comparison when we're talking about this. And he's choosing God. He's choosing the greater reward. That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Are we choosing, because of faith, because of hope, the greater reward? Now, when we talk about Moses, it doesn't take very long to get to this amazing thing that he saw. Right? Whenever I picture the burning bush, it's almost more like a burning shrub. Like it was this little thing that was just burning. I can't imagine what this thing had to have looked like. Because the way it's described, he sees it, and he says, I got to get closer to this. I got to go see what this is. I need to see this bush in Exodus, the third chapter. And it's not being consumed. And he says, I need to go up and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. Can you imagine what this is like? This is God. So what is God making this bush look like? So if we have a picture, I guarantee you it was even more spectacular than that picture. It's awesome. And Moses sees this thing. And he goes up to it, and he's going to have a conversation here with God. And it is a fascinating story that occurs. So if you would open your Bibles to Exodus, the 3rd chapter, I want you to notice as we go through this, the growth of Moses as we continue through 3 and 4, his need to grow over some excuses that he's going to make, and why all of a sudden we begin to see as we go through the book of Exodus, his hope, his confident expectation, his trust in God grows. And it's going to be very obvious as we go through this that God is pointing out to him what he needs to truly focus on. So he goes through this story. God tells him, look, I need to save my people. I've seen what they're going through. And so he goes through the whole conversation about being holy, and he's talking to Moses, and he's saying, I need you to go to Egypt. You're going to deliver my people. And so Moses is hearing this, and Moses, bless his heart, he's just a shepherd at this point. He sees this bush, he hears this voice coming, and what's the first thing he asks of God in verse 11? What's he say to him? What's he say? I know you guys can do it. I'll even help you out. There you go. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I that they're going to listen to me? And God answers that question for him. What does he tell him in verse 12? I will be with you. He says, it's not about you, Moses. Who am I? You're Moses. That's fine. I'm God. And that's ultimately what he's going to say. He's going to go to the people. And then this next part, and he says, okay, all right, you're going to be with me. I can understand that. Well, what about when I get there and I begin to say, hey, the God of the fathers, our fathers sent me. And they say, what's his name? Who sent you? And what does God answer to that question?
I am who I am.
Wow, that's very good. No, that was good. So Moses says, I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes. Moses says, who are you? Who am I supposed to tell them? I'm just going to go up to the people and be like, hey, God sent me. And they're going to be like, who? Who sent you? And he says, I want you to tell them Yahweh sent you. I want you to tell them my name. I am sent you. I am who I am. You can say it again, Bonnie.
I am who I am.
Perfect. Thank you.
Not quite like Charlton Heston.
No, that was good. He's dead. I can't help him. I am. The words itself means he brings into existence whatever exists. You tell him the eternal existing one sent you. I am. Right? Well, last night we talked about in John 8, this is exactly what Jesus says when he's talking about Abraham. Before Abraham was, I am. This is where we get this name. This name that Israel, as time goes on, will not say. They're not going to say his name. That's why there's other names we call it. That's why if you actually look this up, we're not even sure how to pronounce it necessarily. But you have Yahweh, Jehovah in particular is what we're talking about. So you imagine Moses being told, you need to tell them my name. I'm going to be with you. I am is sending you. And then chapter 4 begins, and it's a question we all ask. What does Moses ask? Just the first couple of words of his question. What if? Just a couple words, Matt. What if? What if? We all ask these questions. What if? So far we're told this is about God. This is what God's telling him. Hey, who am I? It doesn't matter. I'm God. I'm going with you. Well, who are you? I'm Jehovah. I'm the eternal one. I'm the one who makes everything exist. Okay, well, what if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? What if that happens? And then, bless his heart, God had answers. And he gives them these signs. I want you to do these signs. So Moses is able to do these signs that we're going to see. And then you get down to verse 10. So he's taken away every excuse from them. You get to verse 10, and what's the excuse made? I'm no good at talking. What he tells them. I can't do it. I'm unable to do it. I'm not eloquent. I'm not going to be able to speak. Who is Moses still focusing on? Moses. Moses. I can't do it. I'm not able to speak. What if they ask me questions? What if I don't know how to answer the questions? And God says, relax, dude. I'm with you. I'm with you. Guess that's the exact same thing he says to us. I'm with you. This is about God. And so the issue that Moses is having so far are the excuses that we all would have. I guarantee you, many of these, if I could talk at this in Exodus 3 and 4 after seeing the bush and hearing the voice, I would have very many same excuses that would come up. And I definitely would have said the last one, for sure. In verse 22, or excuse me, in verse 13, what does he ultimately come down? He's given excuse after excuse after excuse. God knocks him out of the park. What's the last thing he says? Yeah, probably shouldn't be me. It's, you know what, let's just pick somebody else. What just happened? Someone else. Just pick somebody else. It's so fascinating to me, the story of Moses. Verse 11, so verse 10 is where he's talking about I'm not eloquent. Verse 11, the way that God answers that, who has made man's mouth Or who makes him mute or deaf, or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? It's God's amazing way of saying, who are you talking to? I created you. The fascinating thing that you see of Moses going forward here is who goes with him to speak? Aaron. Aaron's eloquent. We'll send Aaron. How long do you think it takes Aaron to all of a sudden not talk in the Bible anymore? And guess who's talking? Who's doing all the talking to Pharaoh? Moses. What happened? Did he learn how to talk all of a sudden? What happened? He stopped focusing on himself. The amazing thing when it comes to absolute hope is that it's not about self-confidence, it's about God confidence. And I cannot say that any clearer. When it came to Moses, if we are always focusing on ourselves like he was, putting it through his prism, I can't talk to people. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about God first. What if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to? Let me ask you that. Because I've asked some questions that seem pretty easy to me and I had trouble getting answers. So how would you answer a question if you didn't know the answer? What would you do if somebody came up and asked you a question you don't know the answer to? Okay, you ask a question. It's 2024. What would you do? You just Google it. You can Google right now, how many times does it say or where does it say grace in the Bible? And great old Google will show you how many times. You can even ask what version you would like. Okay? There's so many things that you don't have to pay for it. It's simple. When I was younger, we had to learn how to look things up in books. Right? You don't even have to do that now. The excuse that we had is gone. Even from that standpoint. The reality is, the issue when it comes down to this is that we just focus on ourselves. What if they ask me a question? Well, then you go ask the one who knows all things, the eternal one, Yahweh, the one who sent you, the one who is able to answer those questions, the one that's able to show you in his word the answer to those questions. And by the way, side note, there's a really good chance you know the answer to the questions. At least by saying, I don't know. That's the answer to some questions. And it's okay. But there is no question in my mind when I read the story of Moses, especially in Exodus, the 3rd chapter and 4th chapter, that the biggest change of him to having confident expectation, for him to be able to get to the point to say, stand and see the salvation of the Lord, when we get to that part in just a minute, was because he stopped looking at himself and he began to look at God. And he allowed God to be God. That's the issue that we have when it comes to hope. That's the change from a wishful hope to confident expectation in who my God is. And he's going to do exactly what he says. That's the growth. And that's what I think one of the things we're to learn from Exodus 3 and 4 when it comes to Moses himself. Dwayne?
Yeah, thinking about this confidence thing, in his answers to God, he is not confident percent in himself. And the irony is God knows what's in it. And that's why he's calling you to do this. And then centuries later, Stephen's talking about him before he's stoned, and he says, you all remember Moses, that one that was powerful in words and deeds? It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to learn from Moses. Good, not good or bad, but when he's starting off and you see the growth of him, and then obviously the man he's going to become. But it's just fascinating because we all have these excuses. The fact that the Bible, we actually use the words what if, and I use those words all the time. What if? It's amazing. Humans have not changed, and God has not changed. For us, it simply comes down to whether or not we're going to focus on him. Brian?
Right, so you can tell me, I don't know where you're going next, but that self-confidence, God confidence thing also, too, I think with Moses is God's plan versus Moses' plan, which again comes up in Acts 7, right, that he slays the Egyptian thinking that that's going to start this riot or revolt, right, he's going to lead them to freedom, and God's like, that's not my plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes him 40 years to get to that point, to be humble enough
Yeah, it's interesting to that point, Acts 7, even just reading through the rest of Exodus here, he doesn't go in, talk to Pharaoh, and boom, they're gone. He has to endure, as the word is used in Hebrews. He endures a lot of things. He's trying to figure out why this hasn't happened just like that. There's things that he's going to go through. And what's important for us to understand is that what is said in Exodus 3 is exactly what it says in 1 John 4:4 for us. You are from God, little children, and have overcome, that's conquer, them, because greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. So you and I go around this world and we're thinking, what am I going to do to change this world? What am I going to be able to do? And what does this verse say? It's about your Father. He's the one that's greater than anything in this world, not you. We've got to understand who we are. It takes a huge burden away from us that we can't even carry. It's about him. It's about turning people to him, allowing God to be God and do the things that he's going to do. We have a part in it, just like obviously Moses is going to have a part in it, but it's about God. And that's the neat thing when you think about his plan. So 1 John, the 2nd chapter, you don't have to turn there, but 1 John, the 2nd chapter, 25 says, this is the promise you have, eternal life. That's the promise God has given you. Why is it that there are Christians that are not confident in their salvation? Is it because God didn't say it? You have eternal life as my children, he says. That's my promise to you. And he'll go on in verses 28 and 29 and talk about you should be confident in that. Why do we lack confidence? Because we make it about us. It's about us. Oh, I don't know if God's going to forgive me. I know that he says if I repent, he'll forgive me. Well, then what's the problem? What's the problem? We get so caught up in our side of things rather than the God side. And it takes, I'm telling you, it takes away burdens that we are not meant to carry. God, allow God to be God. He's the eternal one. He's the reason why you exist. Let him do what he does. And it took me a long time to get that. I could read the verses, but to truly understand that, it'll take burdens off of you that we cannot carry. And it's an issue for a lot of people throughout the world that are striving to serve God. Allow him to do what he does. So, anybody else on that part before we move on? All right, so obviously we know the rest of the story. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, so that he would destroy the firstborn and would not touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as though they were passing through dry land, and the Egyptians, when they attempted it, were drowned. So again, Hebrews does a great job of quickly telling you what's going to happen as we go through all the rest of this. Again, as I said earlier, this idea, the idea of endurance is so important. He was focused on the unseen, the one, the God that was sending him. And that's so important throughout all of this. When Moses gets to the Red Sea, what does God tell him to do? What's all he has to do? Just raise the staff. I should have put this up to help you. Mr. Bennett did a tremendous job of describing and showing what this is. He knows. This is exactly what Moses did. You think about Moses parts the Red Sea. Oh no. Moses was involved for sure. But never forget who parted the Red Sea. God parted the Red Sea. It's powerful. Moses certainly plays his part. We all play our part for sure. We all have things that we need to do. Obedience, we're going to talk about that tomorrow night. But never misunderstand who has the power, who our God is, and certainly what he is able to do. The people, when they get to the water, I always wonder this. What would you have focused on? What would you focus on? Yeah. When are those walls falling down, and why are the people in front of me walking so slow? That's what I'd be doing. Look at the fish. Ooh. You reach in. I can't remember which kid said, Do you think that that's where they came up with the idea of aquariums? It's a good question. I don't know. But you think about that. Would they be focusing on the enemy behind them? Yeah, that would be on my mind. All right. Or would we focus on the fact that I am walking on dry land in the middle of a sea because God said I'm going to do that? What do we focus on? You and I are promised salvation. What do you focus on? The fish in the world? The walls? When are the walls going to fall down? When is the worst thing going to happen in our country? When we all get so caught up? And God's like, dude, I gave you dry land. Walk. Walk. We get so caught up and so focusing on other things, and we miss what God is doing right before us. That's why I think Moses says, just stand back, or God says with Moses, stand by and watch the salvation of the Lord. Just watch and walk through on dry land. That's the amazing thing about this story, is how quickly we can certainly see it with Israel. They're going to get across the street, I almost said. They're going to get across the water. The land, you know what happens for the Egyptians. But as soon as they get over, what do they start doing? Complaining. I'm afraid we're complaining while we're walking across, let alone when we get over. So when we make application of this, that's the important piece. It's the same God. It's the same God. And if we're not careful, we're going to react the same way as they would, and they did. That's the important lesson, at least for me, when we talk about this story and everything that's happening. There's a lot that you could break down with the plagues. All the plagues had reason. It's not because God just said, all right, let's just, frogs. You know, there were reasons for the plagues. They went against Egyptian gods, every single one of them, and they better listen to what God was going to say. We talked about in Hebrews, the 11th chapter, about he kept the Passover. What would have happened if they would not have kept the Passover? They would be dead. It would be the death of the firstborn. That screaming and noise it talks about that they could hear from Egypt would have happened there. But because they did that, he passed over. Who's our Passover lamb? We better make sure that we're participating. We need to make sure that we've kept the same. We need to understand what those things are, because in essence, death is coming. We need to be ready and to understand that. So we're coming to the end. I put these up. Lessons learned about God. It is worth noting his name, I am. He brings into existence whatever exists. Bonnie, you want to do it one more time?
I am who I am.
Thank you. You sound like Ben. That's so funny. You sound like Ben.
I was thinking Ben should have done it.
No, he's not here. I can't do it. It's so much better you doing it. The awesome thing about that name, though, in the Old Testament, and again, we've had Bible classes on this, quarters on this. The names are so important. Last night we talked about Jehovah Jireh. God provides. Here you have Yahweh, his name, and the importance of that name. When you hear Yahweh, when you're talking about God, you get it in different names like Elijah. You get it in Isaiah, Jeremiah. It's in all the different names. We say hallelujah. All the different things that have that yah sound is for God. And so you think about all the different reasons and purpose of different names that happen in the Old Testament. It's just awesome. And hopefully it causes us to really understand what the hope was that they were going to be focusing on, which is God. And it's the same for us. The I am, our Father, our God, the one who is eternal, is still in charge. And if that's the case, then our definition of hope needs to be confident expectation, not because of you, but because of him. And I'm going to make this, if I said to you, if you know exactly what you need to do for salvation, okay? Exactly what you need to do for salvation. If you choose not to do that, you can have confident expectation in what? You're going to lose your soul. You can be confident in that. That's how his promises are. If you don't keep them, if you're not going to do what he has commanded us to do, because of his grace and mercy and love that he wants us all to be with him for eternity. It's our choice, but it's going to be our choice of where we're going to spend eternity. He has promised you this amazing opportunity. You turn over to Romans, the 8th chapter, for just a minute. In Romans chapter 8, this is a awesome chapter talking about the victory in Jesus, the relationship we can have with the Spirit, just a beautiful picture of the relationship we have with God. But in verse 24, he says, "For in hope we have been saved, but hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he already sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, with perseverance we wait eagerly for it." I love that description. But it's only a beautiful description if it's true. If I'm actually eagerly awaiting it. If I'm eagerly, with perseverance, looking forward to it. That's my part of this job. That's my part. The obedience unto him, and then the living for him part of things. This hope is not based on things that you see. It's based on the fact that we can have confident expectation in what he has done, what we've read in the scriptures, knowing he's kept his promises, and that he's going to continue to do so. And we just need to make sure that we are trusting in him. Lessons about Moses and for mankind. It's not about us. It's not about us. You're not the main character in your story if you have a relationship with God. It's about you and God. Certainly it's about him, though. It's that relationship that we have with him. It is a beautiful picture. And we need to make sure that we are putting him not only above others, but above ourselves. It's him. It's about him. And we need to make sure that we're doing those things in all that we do, including some of the excuses we were really good at coming up with. And as I said, hope isn't just some sort of a wish that we can get caught up with as well. It's about confident expectation. I know I've ever since I've talked about this, I still hear people use hope in that manner. So I can talk about it evidently for 20 years. But that's what it comes down to. We use that word improperly. And we need to really understand what hope is when it comes to God, when it comes to his word. You turn over to Romans 15. There's as he's closing up this book, coming to the end. We were talking about names of God. What does this call God here? Romans 15:13. What is he? The God of hope. He's the God of hope. He's the God of hope who fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. So I ask you in verse 13, from an application standpoint, when we talked about Moses, when we talk about ourselves, what is this God of hope supposed to bring to us when we allow him to do so? When we have that relationship, what does he offer us in this verse? Joy and peace. Joy and peace. Joy and peace. You ask anybody in this world, that's what people want. That's what Christians want. And you have it in front of you. We all do. Joy and peace is found in the God of hope if we have a relationship with him. If we're truly focusing on him and doing the things and understanding who he is as the God of all things. Over in Isaiah chapter 40, this is a verse you'll see in Hobby Lobby. You probably all have it at your house. We sing about it. But it's one of those verses, again, it's a beautiful verse, but if you don't apply it, it's just words. It doesn't even mean anything. You have to apply it. So Isaiah 40, in verse 31, "Yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary." In order for the rest of that verse to happen, what's the thing we have to do in the first part of the verse? Wait on the Lord. Now, what do other versions say? Anybody else have another version? Or does everybody say wait? Hope. Good. I'm glad you said that. Hope. Hope in the Lord. Some may say trust in the Lord. You're waiting on the Lord. What's that mean? You're allowing God to be God. You're allowing him to do what he does. And what does he offer us if we do those things? If we wait on the Lord, you're going to gain new strength. You're going to have that peace. You're going to have that joy. Will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. Why? Why is that the case? Who's the key in that? God is. God's the key. You have peace. When we talk about peace in this world, as children of God, what is peace? What is it? It's the presence of God. It's not the absence of trials. It's the presence of God. You go through this life and have peace because God is with you. You're still going to have trials, but it's his presence. What is joy? What is joy? It's a choice. It's not an emotion. It's not a happiness. It's a choice. I choose to react to things that I go through in this life. It's joy. So when we go through things, in Romans the 15th chapter, he says, I give you two things, joy and peace. The peace is God. He's with us. The joy is me knowing he's with me, and I'm choosing to respond in the appropriate manner because I know I have God confidence. I have hope in him and what he has done. That's what this relationship is when we're talking about our relationship with God and what we're striving to be like. The last thing I just want to make mention of, because I know we're coming to the end, in Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 6, it talks about Moses. Moses was an amazing man. But in Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, it talks about Moses was a servant. And the comparison to Jesus Christ was Jesus was the Son. He's the Son. And so when you think about Moses, and we talk about all of these men, I've said it every night, they're not superheroes, they're just man. They're just humans looking to have a relationship with God, looking towards the reward. They're tremendous examples for us to follow, good and bad things that happen in their lives. It's the same opportunity that we all have, but it's all about the same God. It's all about him and serving him. Tomorrow night we're going to talk about Joshua. And so if you can just read Joshua 1 through 24 chapters, that would be great. And we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you.